Kate, thank you. And what you just heard were some of the shots that were heard in August as 6 officers were shot during a dramatic standoff that lasted for hours.
They call it the Cradle of Liberty. Philadelphia. A city built on revolution, resilience, and stories that echo through every street, but behind the landmarks and the legacy lies a darker timeline most people never see. Because here, the line between ordinary life and unthinkable violence can snap in an instant. In this compilation, you'll hear glimpses of the moments that shook the city to its core. When a mother was stabbed inside her van at dawn, when a lover's body was found burning in the quiet green of Fairmount Park, when an innocent man was gunned down outside a prison gate, and when a missing woman's fate was uncovered inside her own couch. These are just fragments of what lies ahead. Stories of rage, betrayal, desperation, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Each case peeling back another layer of the city's shadowed side. Welcome to Philadelphia, where every story begins with daylight, but not all of them end there. Hey there, and welcome to Murderize Now. Before we dive into today's case, I want to hear from you. It helps me know where our true crime family is watching from. So drop a comment right now. Tell me your city and what the weather is like outside your window. Are you cozy inside? Is it snowing? Raining? Let me know. All right, ready? Let's go. Case number 1 is that of Maurice Hill, a man whose name became synonymous with one of the most chaotic and unnerving police standoffs Philadelphia had seen in years. This story begins not with a calculated plan or a predetermined act of violence, but with a single moment spiraling into hours of fear, confusion, and danger. A day when an entire neighborhood was trapped under the sound of gunfire, and the city collectively held its breath. Hill was no stranger to law enforcement. His record stretched back decades, a history woven with illegal firearms charges, narcotics, and repeated run-ins with the system. Yet, even with that past, nothing hinted at the scale of the confrontation that would unfold on a humid summer afternoon in 2019. It began with officers from the Narcotics Strike Force executing what should have been a routine warrant. They entered the row house expecting resistance, yes, but not the eruption that greeted them the moment they stepped inside. As they cleared the first rooms, gunfire exploded from deeper within the home. It was immediate, relentless, and frighteningly precise. Officers scrambled for cover as bullets tore through drywall and shattered glass. In moments, the house transformed into a battleground, a confined, unforgiving space where every wall hid uncertainty and every doorway carried the danger of another shot. Several officers were trapped inside, pinned down by the barrage. Outside, neighbors fled or ducked for safety, the sounds echoing through the narrow streets like a warning no one had time to process. This wasn't just violence, it was a siege, one man holding an entire city at a standstill. Hill fired again and again, refusing every attempt at negotiation. 6 narcotics officers were wounded in the chaos, their injuries non-fatal, but severe enough to underscore just how close the situation came to becoming a tragedy of far greater magnitude. Meanwhile, SWAT teams mobilized. Armored vehicles sealed off the block, and tactical units worked feverishly to extract the officers still trapped inside. Hours passed with no sign of surrender. Instead, Hill dug in deeper, armed with an assault rifle and an unwavering determination to outlast the wall of law enforcement forming around him. By early evening, the scene had become a media storm, broadcast across the nation. Helicopters hovered overhead, sirens pulsed through the streets, and families waited anxiously for updates. For law enforcement, it became a test of strategy, patience, and caution. A single misstep could trigger more violence. A rushed entry could cost lives. While negotiators worked to establish some sliver of dialogue, Hill responded with more gunfire, pushing the standoff into the realm of the surreal. One man barricaded in a row home, managing to paralyze an entire neighborhood. But even the longest standoffs break eventually. After nearly 8 exhausting hours, something shifted. Voices carried, a pause held. And then, without warning, Maurice Hill stepped out. Surrounded by flashing lights and drawn weapons, he surrendered. The city exhaled, officers rushed to secure the building, and the wounded were taken for treatment. No one had died that day, And considering the hail of bullets unleashed, that fact alone felt nothing short of miraculous. The aftermath that followed was swift and unequivocal. In court, prosecutors laid out the severity of Hill's actions: the attempted murders, the reckless disregard for life, the war zone he created in a residential neighborhood. Testimony described trapped officers whispering updates over police radio, negotiators trying to calm a man who refused all reason, and the emotional toll on the community forced to watch their block turn into an armed encampment. Hill showed little remorse. The court responded with a sentence designed to ensure he would never return to the streets: 120 to 240 years in prison, effectively a lifetime behind bars. This case stands as a reminder of how quickly violence can engulf an entire community, how one individual's desperation and defiance can echo across a city. But while this story was defined by sustained gunfire and survival, the next case turns in a different direction, revealing how secrecy, denial, and hidden relationships can ignite a tragedy all their own. Case number 2 is that of Kylan Pratt, a young man who committed an unthinkable act to protect a secret he believed could destroy him. His life was split between the persona he showed the world and the hidden relationship he shared with Nazir Johnson, a relationship he cared about but was terrified to acknowledge publicly. That fear, over time, grew into a dangerous internal pressure that shaped every decision he made. Pratt lived constantly on edge, worried that rumors or suspicions would expose him. For Nazir, their connection was genuine and meaningful. But for Pratt, it became a symbol of vulnerability, something he felt he had to hide at any cost. Arguments began to surface, tension grew, and the emotional weight of the double life Pratt maintained slowly pushed him toward a breaking point. That breaking point came when fear overcame reason. During a private meeting, Pratt shot Nazir Johnson, killing the one person who knew the truth he could no longer control. The violence did not end there. Driven by panic, he transported Nazir's body to Fairmount Park, doused it with accelerant, and set it ablaze in a desperate attempt to erase the evidence of their relationship and the crime itself. But instead of eliminating the truth, the burning body drew immediate attention from investigators. Detectives quickly recognized the fire as an unmistakable attempt at concealment. Tracing Nazir's last interactions led them directly to Pratt, whose inconsistent statements and digital footprints began to unravel the false narrative he attempted to build. As investigators pieced together the timeline, the motive became starkly clear. Pratt was willing to kill to keep his relationship with Nazir hidden. In court, prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the crime: the shooting, the transport of the body, and the attempt to destroy all traces of the victim's identity. They portrayed Pratt's actions as a calculated decision driven by fear and internalized conflict, not a sudden outburst. The emotional toll on Nazir's family was profound as they mourned a young man taken by someone who claimed to care for him. The judge imposed a life sentence reflecting both the brutality of the act and the irreplaceable loss inflicted. Pratt's attempt to bury the truth ended with the destruction of 2 lives: Nazir's, whose future was stolen, and his own, which would now be lived behind bars. And where this case was rooted in secrecy and hidden identity, the next turns to a different kind of darkness, a crime concealed not by fire, but by being tucked away inside the most unexpected place imaginable. Case number 3 is that of Gurley Reyes, a case defined not by a sudden explosion of violence, but by calculated concealment and a disturbing attempt to disappear after the act. This story unfolds inside a workplace where 2 co-workers, Reyes and Ulises Martinez, carried underlying tensions that few around them recognized. What began as ordinary disagreements slowly escalated into a dangerous personal conflict far more intense than anyone could have imagined. Reyes and Martinez worked together long enough for friction to build. Colleagues later described moments of strain between the 2 women, subtle signs that their relationship had soured. Yet nothing suggested the situation would ever turn deadly. That changed abruptly when Reyes, fueled by anger or resentment still not fully understood, confronted Martinez in a private setting. The encounter spiraled into violence, and Reyes attacked with startling ferocity, stabbing Martinez multiple times. The brutality of the assault made it clear the act was not impulsive, it was personal. But the most chilling part came after the killing. Instead of alerting authorities or attempting to explain what happened, Reyes moved quickly to hide the crime. She stuffed Martinez's body inside a futon, wedging it deep within the frame as though the concealment might buy her time. Days passed quietly, the body undiscovered, while Reyes stayed silent, a calm facade masking the reality of what had occurred. The discovery happened only when the odor and the unusual weight of the futon drew attention. When investigators opened it, they found Martinez's body in a state that left no doubt of foul play. The shock of the concealment intensified the urgency of the investigation. Detectives quickly identified Reyes as the last person with Martinez, and the evidence left behind made it clear she had fled. Her escape took her far beyond city limits. By the time authorities pieced together the timeline and issued alerts, Reyes had already left the country. But international fugitives rarely stay hidden for long. Through cooperative efforts with foreign law enforcement, she was located and arrested in Madrid, bringing an abrupt end to her attempt to vanish. With her capture, the narrative crystallized. A workplace conflict turned lethal, a body hidden in a piece of furniture, and a suspect who tried to outrun responsibility across borders. The case stands as a reminder of how violence can erupt in the most familiar environments and how concealment only deepens the tragedy. And while this case was defined by a desperate attempt to hide a crime, the next unfolds in a moment of heated conflict, where an argument in a hallway turned into a fatal decision witnessed within seconds. Case number 4 is that of Samaya Williams, a case born not from long-planned malice, but from a volatile domestic situation that erupted in a moment of emotional chaos. This is a story set on New Year's Eve, a night when most people look forward to renewal, celebration, and possibility. But inside one Philadelphia apartment building, tension had reached a breaking point long before midnight arrived. The conflict centered around Williams, her mother, and her mother's fiancé, Adrean Reeves. Police had already been called earlier in the evening for a domestic disturbance. Officers spoke to the parties involved, assessed the scene, and ultimately left once things seemed to have calmed down. But what looked settled on the surface was anything but stable underneath. Resentments lingered, emotions simmered, and by the time the police exited the building, a fragile peace was all that remained, one that would not hold for long. Minutes later, another confrontation began in the lobby. Witness accounts describe raised voices, accusations, and the rapid escalation of a long-standing family conflict. Williams, who had already been emotionally charged from the earlier incident, found herself caught once again in the heated exchange. In that moment, reason dissolved. Williams pulled a firearm and shot Reeves in the lobby, an act that unfolded in seconds but carried consequences that would reverberate for years. The shooting sent residents scrambling and triggered immediate emergency calls. First responders rushed back to the same building they had visited only moments before, now finding Reeves critically injured. He did not survive. Williams, who had not fled the scene, was taken into custody, her emotions shifting between shock and devastation as the reality of what transpired settled around her. The investigation was swift given the clear circumstances, witnesses present, surveillance cameras in the lobby, and the history of the earlier domestic dispute. Prosecutors built a narrative centered on the escalating conflict, emphasizing how the volatility of the relationship, combined with the emotional state Williams was in, contributed to the fatal outcome. But while context explained the buildup, it did not excuse the decision to use deadly force. In court, Williams faced the full impact of her actions. The prosecution focused on the rapid escalation and the choice to resort to violence, while the defense highlighted the tense environment and the emotional turmoil leading up to the incident. Ultimately, the case became a tragic example of how domestic disputes can turn lethal within seconds, especially when weapons enter the equation. Reeves's death left a void in the family, and Williams's life, once filled with possibilities, became defined by a single irreversible moment. It was a reminder that domestic tension, when left unresolved, can collapse into irreversible tragedy. And while this case was fueled by raw emotion and split-second decisions, the next one unfolds in an entirely different way. a relationship shadowed by intimacy, trust, and a betrayal that ended in the murder of a well-known Philadelphia journalist. Case number 6 is the story of Gianna Tan Webb, a tragedy where youthful arrogance and reckless decision-making collided on a dark highway, shattering 3 families in an instant. This case is not defined by a fractured relationship, but by profound negligence, a choice to prioritize a thrill over the sanctity of human life, turning a routine patrol into a nightmare. Webb, just 21 years old, was navigating the night with a dangerous confidence. In a twist of cruel irony, she had been stopped for speeding just minutes earlier by the very troopers she would soon kill. They had released her only because they received a priority call to assist a pedestrian walking dangerously on the interstate. Webb's mindset was visible to the world. On social media, she had boasted about her ability to drive intoxicated, a chilling digital footprint of the ego that fueled the night's events. Then came the impact. Just after midnight on I-95, troopers Martin Mack III and Brandon Siska were on the shoulder, guiding pedestrian Reyes Rivera Oliveras to safety. The scene was controlled until Webb's SUV, traveling at over 100 mph, tore through the darkness. The collision was catastrophic. In a split second, the massive force of the impact claimed all 3 men, throwing them into the opposing lanes and reducing the vehicle to mangled steel. The legal fallout was immediate and severe. Investigations revealed Webb's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Standing before a grieving courtroom, the defense could offer little against the weight of her actions. Webb pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and homicide by vehicle, receiving a sentence of 27.5 to 60 years in prison. The loss rippled through the state. 2 dedicated officers and a civilian were gone, leaving a void in the community and serving as a stark reminder of the lethal power of a vehicle weaponized by alcohol. And while this tragedy unfolded amidst the chaos of a public interstate, the next case retreats into the claustrophobic silence of a parked van, where a mother's attempt to escape a toxic relationship ended in a brutal betrayal. Case number 7 focuses on Raymond Thompson, a harrowing example of how domestic toxicity can render even legal protections powerless. This case is defined by possessiveness, a refusal to let go that transformed a longtime partnership into a brutal execution, leaving a devastating void in the lives of 6 children. The victim, Ashley Lockheart, was a dedicated mother who had recognized the danger she was in. She had taken the correct legal steps, securing a protection from abuse order against Thompson, her fiancé, in an attempt to shield herself and her family from his escalating instability. Yet, the psychological tether of domestic abuse is strong. Despite the court order, the 2 met inside Lockhart's Honda Odyssey in West Philadelphia, a decision likely driven by Thompson's manipulation or a final attempt by Lockhart to negotiate peace. The interior of the van, typically a space of family routine, became a scene of unimaginable violence. Thompson, unable to accept the end of his control, attacked Lockhart with a knife. The assault was frantic and personal. He stabbed her multiple times in the face and arms, extinguishing her life in the very vehicle she used to transport her children. When police arrived, the scene was quiet but gruesome. Thompson was eventually apprehended, facing murder charges for an act that the district attorney described as incredibly tragic. The community was left reeling, not just from the violence, but from the heartbreaking reality of 6 children suddenly left without their mother due to a father figure's rage. Thompson's actions underscored the terrifying reality that a piece of paper often cannot stop a determined abuser. His arrest brought legal closure, but no solace for the shattered family unit left behind. And where this case involved a singular act of rage by an ex-partner, the next one reveals a colder, more calculated cruelty, where a man murdered his pregnant girlfriend and then enlisted the help of another woman to burn the evidence and hide the truth. Case number 8 uncovers the disturbing pact between Justin Smith and Talia Garnett, a story defined by cold calculation and a conspiracy to erase a human life. This case explores the darkest depths of betrayal, where a partner turns into an executioner and an accomplice steps in to help bury the truth. The victim, Diana Bryce, was 4 months pregnant, carrying the hope of a new future. However, her relationship with Smith had turned lethal. Instead of preparing for fatherhood, Smith allegedly viewed Bryce and their unborn child as liabilities to be eliminated. But the horror of this case lies not just in the murder, but in the lack of remorse that followed. Smith did not act alone in the aftermath. He enlisted the help of Talia Garnett, a woman willing to cross moral lines to aid a killer. The cover-up was systematic. After ending Bryce's life, the pair worked to destroy the evidence. They transported her body to a wooded area in southwest Philadelphia, discarding her like refuse. To complete the erasure, they drove Smith's car, the likely crime scene, to a secluded spot and set it ablaze, hoping the flames would consume the forensic traces of the violence. Police eventually unraveled the plot. Garnett was arrested and charged with arson, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence for her role in the grisly cleanup. However, justice remains agonizingly incomplete. Justin Smith fled immediately, becoming a fugitive. He remains at large, leaving Bryce's family without closure, and the city haunted by the knowledge that a man capable of murdering his pregnant girlfriend is still out there. And while Smith runs to avoid answering for a domestic crime, the next case features a young man who ran from the prison walls themselves. A teenage serial killer whose spree of violence terrorized the city long before his escape made national headlines.